never go to the beach at night. I used to love going to the beach, just like most people my age. Young, energetic, and freshly out of college, trying to savor that last sliver of freedom before the reality of adult life set in. At the time, I was falling hard and fast for a girl named Jessica. That summer, we'd often drive out to the beach together. It was only about 10 minutes from my place, and we'd spend hours there just enjoying each other's company. For us, it was like going out for drinks or hitting a favorite cafe. More often than not, though, we preferred the beach at dusk or late into the night. There were a lot of reasons for that. The sun wasn't beating down on us, the sand was cool beneath our feet, and best of all, the place was practically empty. While the boardwalk stayed busy with tourists grabbing overpriced corn dogs and silly souvenir t-shirts, the beach itself was peaceful and quiet. And honestly, on a clear night, the beach is far more beautiful than it is during the day. The moonlight casts a silvery glow over the ocean, turning the water a deep, vivid blue. The breeze off the sea is refreshing. The sound of the waves is calming. And there's something truly magical about the whole atmosphere, something words don't do justice. You'd have to be there on one of those perfect nights to really understand it. But that's not why I'm writing this. I'm not here to romanticize nighttime beach trips. I'm here to tell you about something that happened almost a year ago, something that changed everything for me. Maybe I should rephrase what I said earlier. I used to love going to the beach. These days, I live far away from the ocean, right in the heart of the United States. There's a reason for that, and you'll understand why soon. It happened in mid-July last year. I don't remember the exact date, but I know it was a Friday. I had just gotten back from a late afternoon doctor's appointment, and Jessica was waiting for me at home. We spent some time curled up on the couch watching TV, but the day felt kind of empty, uneventful. That's when we decided to head to the beach. We weren't planning to swim, so we dressed casually, just t-shirts, slacks, and sandals. I packed a few beers, and Jessica brought 2 folding chairs. It was around 6:30 p.m. when we left, but we hit unexpected traffic and didn't reach the boardwalk until after 7. Normally, we'd leave the beach around 8, but that evening, we decided to stay a bit longer. We crossed the boardwalk onto the empty beach, set up our chairs at a comfortable distance from the water and the boardwalk, and just relaxed. There were a few things about that night that didn't seem important at the time, but now, after replaying the memory over and over in my head, they stand out sharply. For one, the boardwalk was unusually quiet. Normally, you'd expect to see at least 20 people milling about at any given time. But that evening, there wasn't a single person in sight. Every store along the boardwalk was closed too, which was extremely out of the ordinary for that time of year. Then there was the cold. It wasn't the kind of chill you'd expect just because it was nighttime. It was the middle of July after all. But that night felt more like October. We were already starting to shiver before we even set foot on the sand. Thankfully, I packed a couple of jackets just in case, and we ended up needing them. Another odd detail, there wasn't a trace of life anywhere. No people, sure, but also no birds, no seagulls, no distant barking dogs, not even the faint buzz of insects. On the way there, we took a sharp left off the main highway, which led us straight to the boardwalk, and the moment we entered the area, it was as if a switch had been flipped. The massive parking lot was completely empty. There were no sounds, no voices, no animals, just the soft crash of waves in the distance. It was only Jessica and me, alone. At the time, we didn't think much of it. We figured we'd lucked out and had the entire beach to ourselves. If only we'd realized that something was very, very wrong and just left. It was around 40 minutes after we'd arrived, just past 8 o'clock. I was finishing my second beer and Jessica was beside me, tapping away on her tablet with one earbud in. That's when we heard it, a sound coming from the ocean. It's hard to put into words. The closest comparison I can think of is a deep, low brass instrument, but it was so much more than that. The volume was staggering. I could feel it in my bones. My entire body was vibrating, like the sensation of sitting in an idling bus, only 100 times more intense. The sound echoed through the air, bouncing off the tall cliffs that framed the beach. It lasted for at least 30 seconds, reverberating all around us. Needless to say, we were both shaken and completely confused. We looked at each other, trying to figure out if we'd both somehow imagined it. But no, there was no doubt about it. The sound was real. "What in the bloody hell was that?" I asked, glancing between Jessica's bewildered expression and the still, dark water. I half expected to see some disturbance, ripples or waves, but the ocean remained eerily still, unnaturally still. "No idea," Jessica finally said after a long pause, her eyes locked on the water. "Looking back now, I can't believe we didn't take the hint and get out of there. Something was clearly off, but we brushed it aside. We told ourselves it was probably some weird sound bouncing off from the city and echoing across the beach. It didn't make much sense, but at the time, it was the only explanation we could come up with. About 20 minutes passed and we had just started to relax again, until it happened a second time. This time, the sound was even more intense. It wasn't louder necessarily, but stronger, more resonant. Like someone had taken a thick cloth off a speaker and now we were hearing it in full clarity. And this time it was unmistakably coming from the ocean. There was something different about it, too, something that made our skin crawl. The sound had an almost organic quality to it, as if it came from some kind of living creature. That realization hit hard, and both of us were completely spooked. Jessica stood up from her chair before the sound had even finished echoing. It lasted for another 30 seconds or so, but she didn't wait. "I think we should go home, Matt." I wasn't about to argue. I stood up too, wobbling slightly, partly from the 2 beers. I've always been kind of a lightweight, and partly from trying to keep my balance on the soft, uneven sand. Jessica was already packing up, folding the chairs and stuffing our things into a bag. I grabbed the chairs, and she took the bag. We were about 200 yards away from the boardwalk, not counting the parking lot, and walking on sand meant it would take at least 15 minutes to get back. We were just about to start moving when I smelled it. I used to volunteer at a fishing resort, and more often than not, the tourists would catch a fish or two, and for whatever reason, toss them onto the ground, along with leftover bait. In the beginning, there was no one assigned to clean the mess up, so within a few days, the entire area reeked of rotting fish. I was one of the lucky volunteers tasked with clearing it out. And that same smell, the overwhelming stench of decomposing fish, was exactly what hit me now. Only this time, it was 10 times worse than anything I'd ever encountered. Jessica caught it too. She immediately bent over, dry heaving and clutching her nose with a gagging noise. I held out a little longer, but the smell was so sudden and vile that my own stomach lurched. My eyes were watering. What in God's name could possibly smell this awful? With our heads down and noses pinched tight, we started stumbling, half jogging toward the boardwalk, trying to get away from it. That's when a new sound broke out behind us. This one, too, from the direction of the water. At first, we heard splashes, loud ones. Then, suddenly, a human scream. Jessica screamed as well, purely out of reflex, and we both started running without hesitation. But something made me slow down enough to glance over my shoulder. God, I wish I hadn't. In the moonlight, I could make out a human-shaped figure sprinting toward us, no more than 50 yards away. But the way it moved wasn't right. It didn't run like a normal person. There was no rhythm, no side-to-side motion, no pumping arms. It was running, spastically. Its legs flailed out at impossible angles, making the figure lurch and nearly collapse with every step. Yet somehow it was fast, terrifyingly fast. Its head whipped wildly from side to side like it had no control over its neck, and its proportions were all wrong. Its legs were grotesquely long, easily twice the length of its arms. Everything about it was just wrong, and the screaming hadn't stopped. As the thing got closer, I could finally make out some of the words. "Oh God, please help me. The biting, the rotting, the water. Please, God, help me." That was all I could really make out. Its voice didn't sound entirely human either. It was wailing, howling the words in a panic, as if to no one in particular. But it was still sprinting directly at us. I could hear Jessica sobbing uncontrollably beside me, but somehow she still managed to keep pace. The alcohol in my system, combined with the surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins, dulled the burning pain I'd expected to feel from the sprint. The 2 folding chairs I'd been carrying were slowing me down, so without hesitation, I dropped them right there on the sand. The boardwalk was just over 100 yards away now. My heart pounded violently in my chest. Jessica's desperate crying mingled with the unnatural screams of whatever was chasing us, echoing all around. As we got closer, I realized something else, something even more terrifying. The boardwalk was pitch black. The soft yellow glow of the streetlights that normally illuminated the closed shops had vanished. They were out. The only light left was the moonlight, just enough to faintly outline the wooden planks of the boardwalk ahead. Reaching toward Jessica, I shouted, "Jessica! The bag! Give me the flashlight!" Even through her tears, she hadn't lost control. Without breaking stride, she reached into the bag and handed me the flashlight we always brought with us on outdoor trips. I flicked it on, and against every instinct telling me not to, spun around and aimed the beam directly at whatever was chasing us. I wish I hadn't. It took a few seconds for my brain to fully register what I was seeing, if it was even real. I prayed for a second that this was all some awful nightmare, but it wasn't. The ache in my legs and the fire in my lungs were too real for this to be a dream. What I saw in the flashlight's beam was the form of a man, if you could still call it that. He was soaked in water and covered in blood, completely naked. His chest wasn't a chest anymore. It was a gaping hole, ringed with cracked bone, as if he'd been blasted open by a cannon. His heart, his lungs, they were gone. And yet impossibly, he was still alive, still running. His legs were far too long, not just abnormally long, but grotesquely, anatomically incorrect. His arms reached almost down to his knees, equally out of proportion. But the worst part, the part I still can't shake, was his skin, or rather, the lack of it. Most of it was simply gone, not flayed off in strips, but gnawed away bit by bit, like something had been feeding on him. Fish, scavengers, the flesh looked chewed, frayed at the edges. His eyes were missing, just 2 vacant open sockets staring blindly ahead. His eyelids had rotted or been eaten away. His nose was gone. His lips, ears, the skin on his cheeks, all missing, revealing his teeth in a permanent skeletal grin. The flesh around his neck was also mostly gone, barely leaving enough tissue to hold his head upright. Bile rose in the back of my throat as I turned forward again, flashlight beam shaking in my hand, struggling not to break down into tears myself. We were both slowing down now, partly from exhaustion, but mostly from the suffocating stench of rotting fish. It had somehow gotten even worse. We were no more than 40 yards from the boardwalk. Just 20 more after that, and we'd be in the parking lot. "Come on, baby. Keep running," I gasped, glancing at Jessica. She had stopped crying. She'd forced herself to focus, zoning in on the only thing that mattered: running. I risked a quick look behind me. The thing was no more than 10 yards away now. "Drop the bag," I yelled. Without hesitation, Jessica let it go, which gave her a slight burst of speed. Seconds later, we reached the edge of the boardwalk. I vaulted over the railing, landing hard, while Jessica had to climb over, giving me a few seconds head start. I sprinted past the shuttered storefronts, Jessica just behind me, leaping over a low concrete barrier as we reached the parking lot. There I spotted our car, the only vehicle in the entire lot, and made a beeline for it. That's when it hit me. I didn't have the keys. Jessica did. I turned around just as she caught up, and the beam of my flashlight lit up her face, eyes wide, filled with panic. "Where are the keys?" I shouted, quickly angling the flashlight back behind her. The parking lot sat slightly elevated from the rest of the boardwalk, so I couldn't see whatever was still chasing us. But the look on Jessica's face, the shift from confusion to horror, told me everything. The keys were in the bag. "Shit!" I yelled, a mix of panic and frustration erupting from my throat. I turned and smashed my elbow into the driver's side window. Nothing. I tried again, this time throwing my full weight behind the strike. The glass shattered with a sickening crunch, pain shooting down my arm. I reached through the jagged opening, flipped the lock, and opened the door. "Get in the driver's seat and unlock my door," I barked. Jessica obeyed without question. I rushed to the passenger side but didn't get in. Instead, I looked her dead in the eyes. "I'm going back for the keys, okay?" Her eyes somehow widened even more, her terror barely containable. Before she could say anything, I reached over and yanked open the glove compartment. My hand fumbled through the contents until it closed around something familiar. Rough, metal, heavy. I didn't need to see it to know what it was. "Lock all the doors, get in the back, hide between the seats," I told her, my voice firm but calm. "I'll be back in 2 minutes with the keys. We're getting out of here. Trust me." Jessica was still trembling, but after a brief hesitation, she gave me a small, terrified nod. I shut the passenger door just as Jessica closed hers, then quickly scanned the parking lot. That's when I noticed something unsettling. There was no sound, no footsteps, no screaming, nothing. Aside from the overpowering stench of decay, it was completely silent. Even the ocean, which had been constantly crashing in the background, had gone mute. After confirming the creature was nowhere in sight, I broke into a full sprint toward the beach, handgun raised in front of me. I had briefly considered leaving the gun with Jessica, but she barely knew how to hold one, let alone use it. Once I reached the beach, I swept the flashlight across the sand, heart pounding in my chest. I remembered she dropped the bag around 40 yards from the boardwalk. It took longer than I'd hoped, but finally, I spotted it. I ran over, dropped to my knees, and yanked it open, digging through until my hand closed around the car keys. I didn't bother taking the bag with me. I just grabbed the keys and turned back toward the boardwalk. That's when I heard it again. That horrible, sickening scream, human yet completely not, echoing from the sea, followed by splashing. Then came that deep, powerful, bone-rattling hum again, reverberating through the air like a monstrous foghorn. I spun around, flashlight and gun aimed toward the water. What I saw nearly made me lose control of my bowels. From every stretch of the shoreline the moonlight could touch, figures were emerging from the sea, staggering, stumbling, then breaking into frenzied sprints. Dozens of them, maybe more. The stench of rotting fish hit me like a wall. It was so intense, it felt like it was burning my throat. And these things, they were faster than the first one we'd seen. Much faster. Shit. I raised the gun, lined it up using the flashlight beam, and fired 6 rounds at the nearest charging figure. No idea if I hit anything. I didn't wait to find out. I turned and ran, harder than I've ever run in my entire life, racing back toward the boardwalk. As I reached it, I made the mistake of glancing over my shoulder. That's when I saw it. Far out at sea, a colossal shape was rising from the water. Even at what had to be hundreds of yards offshore, it was massive. Massive enough that I could see its outline clearly from where I stood. It stretched wide across the horizon, too big, too unnatural to comprehend. And somehow, I knew. Some primal instinct deep in my core screamed the truth. That thing, whatever it was the source of the sound. The one we'd heard earlier. And whatever it was alive. I crossed the boardwalk in a full sprint, fired off 3 more shots behind me just to buy time, and bolted into the parking lot, heading straight for the car. "Jessica!" I screamed, now struggling to be heard over the chorus of guttural shrieks closing in from behind. "I'm back!" I didn't wait for Jessica to respond. I reached through the shattered driver's side window, unlocked the door, and climbed in. My hands were trembling, but I somehow managed to jam the keys into the ignition just as the first few creatures began clawing their way up into the parking lot. The engine roared to life. I threw the car into reverse, backed out fast, and sped toward the road. That's when one of them lunged and latched onto the driver's window. It was still wailing, still babbling, but now the words were completely incoherent. "Shit!" I shouted, instinctively recoiling from its face. The smell, dear God, the smell, was unbearable up close, worse than anything I'd experienced before. I raised the gun with one hand and fired 2 rounds into its head. Its skull snapped back from the impact, but otherwise, it didn't react. It just kept clinging to the door, shrieking. Desperate, I brought the pistol down hard onto one of its hands. With a sickening crunch, the hand dropped away, leaving the creature hanging on by the other. I fired my last bullet into its remaining hand. The creature finally lost its grip and tumbled off the side of the car. I floored the gas pedal, taking the sharp curve that led back to the main highway. As I rounded the bend, I turned for one final glance at the beach. What I saw nearly made my heart stop. That immense shape I'd seen rising from the ocean, it had emerged even more. Now it loomed high above the waves, an enormous, rounded dome reaching hundreds of yards into the sky and easily twice that in width. Then, in a horrifying moment of clarity, I realized what I was looking at. It was a human head. I barely had time to register that when 2 massive, round white shapes appeared on its face, eyes the size of skyscrapers. For just 1 second, they locked directly onto me. Then the car turned and the thing vanished from my sight behind the curve of the road. Slowly, the sounds of traffic returned, car horns, engines, the normal buzz of life. I've never been so relieved to hear the signs of other human beings. "We made it, Jessica," I said, breathing hard, filled with shaky relief. I finally turned to look over my shoulder into the back seat. Jessica, she wasn't there. And that's it. That's my story. There isn't much else to say. I wasn't going back. Not for Jessica. Not for anything. I don't even know what happened to her. I drove straight to the nearest police station, told them we'd been mugged and that Jessica was kidnapped. She's still listed as missing to this day. No one else reported seeing or hearing anything. No strange lights, no screams, not even the smell. I honestly don't know what happened that night. I keep telling myself it had to be a nightmare, but I know that's just wishful thinking. So please, do yourself a favor. Be careful when you're out enjoying the night, especially if you're going to the beach.